Well, guys, I'm still sick and I can't make it in again, so I'm gonna go ahead and make a video for you guys one more time. We're doing more solving by quadratics, graphing and factoring. We'll add maybe one new thing to this. So remember, step one is if it's not already set to 0, you got to do the math to get it to be 0 on one side. All right, then you factor, and then you set each factor to 0 to solve for x. And I'm going to throw that shortcut in the bottoms-up method just to get you more familiar with doing that. You can always go back and watch the first video too to see it completely factored out and then set to 0. All right, so first we're going to look for a GCF on example 1. All right, and we're going to try to divide the smaller number into the bigger number. That does work, and it also does work for 6. And so we know we have a factor, our greatest common factor of 3. There is no variable on each one of these terms, and so we know it's only 3. So we have GCF equal to 3. Of course, we have our parentheses there. We started with 3 terms, so we have to get back to 3 terms. How do we do that? We divide each term by the GCF. 3 divided by 3 is 1. We don't have any variables to divide by, so variable just drops down. -6 divided by 3 is -2. Again, the variable comes down, and then -24 divided by 3 is -8. All right, so I want to say, I can't remember for sure, but unlike yesterday, we have a GCF out here. I don't recall if we had a GCF prior, but here's my note on that. If the GCF does not have a variable, so in this example, an x on it, then you're not going to factor that into the solving part. So now we're only working with the parentheses to get our 2x values. Okay, so now we just go straight to the factoring. We have a -8 and a -2. If you're paying attention correctly, you see I wrote that in correctly. Should be -8 up here, and then -2 down here. Guess it doesn't really matter, but that's the way I've been showing you guys. So 2 numbers that multiply to get you to -8 and combine together to get you -2. That would be a -4 and +2. Bear with me, my mind is thinking slow here. All right, so your 2 factors would be, let's bring down to 3, even though we know we're not going to use it. Would be x minus 4 and x plus 2. Now here's where the shortcut comes into play, guys. And follow this very carefully. We have 2 factors right here. 2 factors. There is no number in front of the x. No number in front of the x. I'm saying this because this is very important. When there's no, not factors, but no coefficients in front of the x. When there's no coefficient in front of the x, then we know our x is going to be equal to opposite of what is already here. So this is a -4. That means x is equal to +4. This is a +2. That means x is equal to +2 or -2. So x is equal to 4 because all we're doing is changing the sign. X is equal to -2. Oh, and then I wrote 3. there's your answer. And so I'll show you why that works. I think I did this yesterday, but I'm going to show you again because I'm going all shortcut on this video. So x plus 2 is equal to 0. That should have been equal to 0 here. Okay. Now, in order to get that off of there, all we're doing is minusing that off of that side. See? And so that's why it just changes signs. X is equal to negative 2. Okay. On to the next example. So the first thing we notice is it's not set equal to 0. And so we got to get that 3 off of that side to this side. Remember, we don't want to move this way because we want this x squared term to be positive. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, we're thinking about it as two sides of the equal sign. So we'll minus 3, minus 3. That leaves us with 6x squared minus 7x minus 3 is equal to 0. And so now we're looking for a GCF. Try our smallest number, see if that divides into our largest number. We notice, if you try it, that's fine. If you can't see this offhand, then just try the technique that I've taught you prior. And that's, again, dividing the smallest number into the largest number. But I know that this isn't going to work because these are prime numbers. Okay? And so we can just get straight to the factoring. So let's set up our x. Remember, you're multiplying a and c. And that's 6 times negative 3. That will give us a negative 18. Then your b term goes here. Two numbers that multiply to give you negative 18 and come together to give you negative 7. That is 9 and 2. We need the signs to work out. So it's going to be a negative 9. Negative 9 times 2 is negative 18. Negative 9 plus 2 is negative 7. So now we have our factors. That is x minus 9, x plus 2. All right, remember we excuse me. Remember we multiplied in by 6. 6 with the negative 3 to get this negative 18, so we have to get the 6 back out of there. So we're going to our bottoms up method. Pay attention very closely here because this is where I'm going to add in the shortcut. So bottoms up method is divide by 6, divide by 6. Guys, this is where we get lazy and we don't simplify. Okay, the shortcut's not going to work. If we don't simplify, you'll get the wrong answer. So essentially, we are looking at just this portion right here. Punch it in your calculator and simplify because it does simplify. What's it going to harm by checking to see if it simplifies or not? Okay. And so we have negative 9 over 6. That simplifies to negative 3 over 2. Now, guys, this is normally where we do our bottoms up. And we take this 2 here and we slide it up in front of the x because we're all simplified and we don't want to leave anything on the bottom. Okay. Here's where the shortcut comes into play. We're solving for x. Okay, so we don't want to do a step just to come back and reverse the step. So we're going to leave it like this. And I told you, anytime you don't have anything in front of the x right here, all you do is use this as x is equal to and change your sign. So this is x minus 3 over 2. So we know x is going to be equal. Need my pen. X is equal to a positive 3 over 2. All we're doing is changing the sign. So then you have 2 over 6. Turn our attention to the next fraction there. That simplifies to a positive 1 over 3. And so essentially we'd have this. Again, this is normally where we do the bottoms up. We don't want to do that because we're solving for it. So since there's no number in front of the x there, let me just draw it in the factor so it looks similar in the parentheses. So now, instead of setting to 0 and solving and doing an extra step, we'll just change the sign of that. And then we'll have x is equal to a negative 1/3. Don't expect you to get it immediately. That's what the practice is for, because you got to get into the rhythm of it. If it helps you to just go ahead and factor it all the way out, set it to 0, and then solve, feel free to do that as well. All right, let's move on to example 3, which I don't know how much really need to see that, but I guess since I'm trying to show you the shortcut in this video, I'll show it to you a few times. First thing, look for a GCF. I know that there's not one, so we'll just keep moving forward. So we'll just get straight to the factoring. We're going to multiply 15 times 8, A and C. And that is 120. Then a negative 22 for our B term. And let me put the standard form up here. I always want to keep note of that. Standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. So just like here, we have an x squared, an x, and then a number all by itself. All right, continuing along, two numbers multiply to get us 120, add or combine to give us negative 22. This is only bad part about this method, guys, is when these numbers are big, they get even bigger when you multiply them. Okay, so we have a 120 there. If you can't think of the numbers, I told you, just divide all the way up. 120 divided by 1, 120 divided by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then eventually you'll get to a 10, 120 divided by 10, and that would give you a 10 and a 12, and those two numbers work. So 10, oh, don't like the way that looks, a 10 and a 12. Have to get our signs to work. We need both of those to be negative. So when you multiply them, they give you a positive 120, and then add together to give you a negative 22. So now we write our factors. X minus 10, x minus 12. Continuing along, we multiplied the 8 to get up here, so we got to do our bottoms up. The technique, but remember, we're not throwing the bottoms up because we're using the shortcut. So divided by 8, divided by 8. These are even numbers. We should know right off the top that you have to simplify there. So let's see what those fractions right here that we're looking at simplify to. So the first fraction, you'll have negative 5 over 4. That's what it simplifies to. So that would be your factor. And then the second one, you have a negative 12 divided by 8. That simplifies to negative 3 over 2. So essentially that's what you have before you do bottoms up. But of course we're not doing bottoms up. We know since there's no coefficient out here, x is going to be equal to this with the opposite sign of that, subtraction. So we're going to have x is equal to a positive 5 over 4. And then the same thing on the other one, that says a negative 3 over 2. And so that's going to be x is equal to a positive 3 over 2. And we're done. So simple. I'm going fast, but you always have the opportunity to pause, rewind, play it back. That's the best part of having a video. So let's move to the next one. I'm not feeling good, so I'm probably going to move even faster. So this is not set up to where it's set to 0. Excuse me. So we have to get all these terms onto one side. We don't want to move the x squared term because that'll end up being negative. We want to bring these two to the left side. And so let's get to work. We have two separate sides. Start by removing this positive 5x. That is a positive 5x. So in order to get rid of it, you have to subtract it. Whatever you do on one side has to be done on the other. That cancels, and that gives us 12x squared minus 5x is equal to 2. Now we got to get that 2 off of there. Positive 2, so we have to subtract it. Whatever you do on one side has to be done on the other. That's gone. It leaves 0 over there. And then now we have our entire quadratic. All right, so now let's factor away. First we'll look for a GCF. 5 right there, that's a prime number, so we know nothing's going to divide in that, so we don't have a GCF. Multiply a times c, that is that number times that number, and that's a 12 multiplied by negative 2, that gives us negative 24, and then our b term always goes on the bottom. Two numbers that multiply to give you negative 24. What is that? That would be negative 8 and a 3. Again, if it doesn't come to you that quickly, divide up. 24 divided by 1, divided by 2, divided by 3, until you get two numbers that look like they can appear to get you to the bottom number. Okay, so now we have our factors of x minus 8 and x plus 3. This should be second nature to you guys at this point. We've done so many factoring problems. So we multiplied by this 12, so we got to get the 12 back out of there. How do we do that? Divide by 12, divided by 12. Remember, we're looking at this as a fraction now. And simplify. Punch it in your calculator, either as division or the fraction key. Negative 8 over 12, that simplifies to negative 2 over 3. So our factor would be looking like that at this point. And we know there's no coefficient. We're not going to add a step for ourselves. So we're just going to, x is going to be equal to this, but opposite sign of that. So x is equal to 2/3. And then you have, what was that, 3 divided by 12? That would be 1/4. So we'd have a factor that looks like that. Again, no coefficients. All we're doing is just changing the sign. That's a positive 1/4. So x is equal to a negative 1/4. Hopefully you're getting this by now. You'll have plenty of practice, so we'll see. Moving along, let's go to my next page here. All right, so example 5. Remember, we want the stuff equal to 0 with a positive x squared term. So how do we do that? We should know how at this point. We got to get this negative 4x to the other side. Opposite of a negative is a positive, so 4x, that zeroes it out, plus 4x. Remember to leave it in standard form. Okay. Then that'll leave us with 5x squared plus 4x is equal to 0. All right, so this one is a little bit different, so we have to pay very close attention to this. But you got to know when to do the shortcut and when not to do the shortcut. Okay, so see, here we have two terms. Normally you'd look for a difference of two squares, but there's no subtraction sign there. And so now we'll go to look for, the first thing you always look for is the greatest common factor. Okay, 5 is a prime number. 4 can't divide into that, neither can 2, 3, 1, or anything like that. They both do have a x in common. And so when you have a variable in common, you take the one with the smallest exponent. Hopefully you guys remember all that. So x, then we have our parentheses, set equal to 0. Divide by your GCF to figure out what goes in the parentheses. So you have a 5 divided by a, remember there's always an invisible 1 there, by a 1, that is a 5. When you're dividing exponents, that's a 2. There's an invisible 1 there for the exponent, so 2 minus 1, that leaves a 1, so you have x. 4 divided by 1 is 4, a positive 4. And then this invisible 1 subtracted by that invisible 1 crosses out your variable altogether. So you're left with x multiplied by 5x plus 4. Now, in this case, we're not doing the bottoms up, and then there's a coefficient here in front of x. So now you have to set both of your factors equal to 0 and then solve. Okay, and so the first one's going to be really easy. Remember, if you have a GCF out here and it has an x on it, you're going to set that equal to 0. If it's a number by itself, then you don't even have to worry about it. Okay, and so let's start with that one. If you set the outside, look how easy this is, guys. If you set the outside of this equal to 0, there is nothing to solve. Okay, so you got x is equal to 0. Well, okay, now we have what x is equal to. So we don't have to do anything with that. So then you have your 5x plus 4, set that equal to 0, and then now we're solving. So let's get rid of the numbers first, the ones without the variables. That's a positive 4, so we got to subtract 4 on that side. That leaves us with 5x is equal to negative 4. We have multiplication here because that's a 5 right next to a variable. Opposite of multiplication is division. Divide by 5. Divide by 5. That cancels out. And then we're left with just an x on that side. So x is equal to negative 4 over 5. Careful not to change signs when you're when you're not using the shortcut. Okay. Let's look at the next example. Okay. First thing we're checking for is it set equal to 0? Yes, it is. So now look for your GCF. Take this bigger number, see if the smaller number divides into that. It does not, and so maybe I should just do it for a review type sake. Then I said take the smaller number, make yourself a little T-chart, and you got 1 and 10. 2 divides into 10, and it gives you a 5. 3 does not work. 4 does not work. And then 5 would be a repeat because we already have a 5 in the table. So now we already tried 10. Let's try 5, and guess what? 5 works. So 5, I don't like the way my circle is there. So 5 works, so it's your GCF. So GCF is 5. Now we set up our parentheses. We know we're still going to be equal to 0. Figure it out, you divide by the GCF. All three terms. Started with three terms, so you'll have three terms in the parentheses. 10 divided by 5, that is, hopefully you know. If you don't know, put it in the calculator. It is a 2. We're not dividing by a variable, so the variable just slides down. X squared. A negative 65 divided by 5 is negative 13x. And then a negative 35 divided by 5 is negative 7. So we got our GCF here. Just one thing to take note of, there is no variable on it, so we're going to get both x values out of factoring the inside here. So let's get to it. Start with our x. That is a negative 7 times a 2. That gives us negative 14, and then negative 13, because the b term always goes there. Guys, I notice when we have problems that look like this, where the numbers are so close, you guys struggle with that. And so just use the elementary way that I told you how to do it. You have a 14, start by doing divided by 1. If you skip the 1, and most of the time it's okay to skip the 1, but you won't see it unless you're doing the division by 1. So 14 divided by 1, you'll see that gives you a 14, and a 1. And you can get to a negative 13 with a 14 and a 1. Just need to work with your signs. So that's a negative 14. Negative 14 plus 1 is negative 13. And a negative 14 times 1 is negative 14. So we're good. So we got our factors now. X minus 14. Let's bring our GCF down just to practice good habits, even though we're not going to use it. Then you got an x plus 1. Okay, we multiplied in with this 2, so we got to divide that back out of there. So we have, all right, so then we're looking at using our shortcut, so we're looking just here at our fractions, and we simplify. So negative 14 divided by 2 is going to be x minus 7. And then 1/2 does not simplify. If you don't know that, put it in your calculator. And so you have x plus 1/2. Take note, this is the bottoms up method. We're not using it because we're not factoring, we're solving, and we're using our shortcut. So this one will be really easy. Both don't have any coefficients, which are numbers in front. So we just give the number there an opposite sign, and we are done. So x is equal to 7. X is equal to negative 1/2, since we're positive up there. Done. Let's keep it moving. All right, guys, this is something totally new. Okay, so we are solving a system of a quadratic in a linear by graphing. Okay, so all that means is, before, when we were trying to find the zeros, roots, solutions, whatever you want to call them, we were going to our x value here. Let's label our axis x and y. We were going to the x axis and looking for where your U shape cuts through the x-axis. Okay. Difference here when you're using the U shape and the linear line is you got to find out where this straight line here cuts through the U shape. And so there's a point there, and there's a point there. It's really that simple. It gets a little bit different when we're solving it just using steps in math and algebra. But I'm going to go over this part, and then hopefully when I get back into class, I'll go over the rest with you guys. And so, like I just said, it's pretty simple. We're looking for that point and that point. There's 2 points where they intersect, and so let's jot them down. How do you jot that down? First, start with your x value that always goes in front. And so right here, we're at the 1, and we go down to the -4. So what's 1 on x? -4 on y. So 1, -4. Excuse me. Next one is we go over on x. We're at 5 on x. It doesn't go up or down, so it's 0 on y. So it is 5 and 0. Okay. We'll talk about this stuff when I get back. I don't want to do this with you guys on video, so hopefully I'll be back and we won't have to worry about that. So watch this, play it back, watch it again, rewind, do whatever you got to do, but good luck and stay out of trouble.